Good evening, and it's good to be back with you again. It's been a while since I've done a video, and I'm really glad to be back here again. Today I want to talk about a topic that's been on my mind. You know, in Facebook it always says, what's on your mind? Well, this has been on my mind, and I want to call it, what's in a name? You know, every name has a meaning. Good evening to my beautiful wife, Lady T, Teresa Jeanette Scott, the proprietor and creator of Lady T's Things with Bling, available for purchasing some beautiful, unique items, custom made, many of them. We suggest that you go to her Facebook page at Teresa Jeanette Scott here on Facebook. You can also tune her in on YouTube, on the YouTube station. Just call, I guess, denoted to put down there, Teresa, exactly what the name of the program is. I want you to subscribe. Hi, sweet tea. I want you to subscribe to her program on YouTube. Good afternoon to my cousin, Kareem. God bless you. I want you to subscribe to her page, her YouTube page. There you will find how she does her unique arts and craft work. It's really beautiful. It's really unique. It's educating, enlightening, just how it works and how complicated it really is. I admire her even the more with her efforts to create some beautiful artwork. So we ask that you will go to YouTube. Teresa put down there on the page the information as to exactly what the name of the page is. We ask you to subscribe to the page, give it a thumbs up, and also click on the button that says notification. It's a bell button. Click that so anytime she has a program, you can automatically receive the notification to your phone or to your computer so that you know exactly when her next broadcast is and can tune in. This is it, YouTube channel, Lady T's Crafting and Creating with Lupus. As you know, my wife has a condition called lupus, autoimmune disease. And so we ask that you will just tune that in. Once again, Lady T's Crafting and Creating with Lupus. And then give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and then hit the notification bell button for you to get the notifications when our next program will be available. Good afternoon to you, Brandon. Today we're going to talk about what's in a name. Every name has a meaning. Your name has a meaning. My name has a meaning. And every name serves to identify who the individual is and what they may become. I know in the Bible there are many names that God chose for people that had originally other names. For example, Abram, name was changed to Abraham. Abram means an exalted father. Abraham means the father of many nations. And as you know, Abraham would become the father of the Jewish people, the Israelites, and the Arabs. He would be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. He would be the father of many nations. There are many Arabic nations. There's the nation of Israel. Well, he's the father of them. And God changed his name from Abram, which means exalted father, to Abraham, meaning the father of many nations. His son Jacob. Jacob means trickster, supplanter, deceiver. And so he was for most of his life. But then he met the angel of the Lord and wrestled with him. And God changed his name to Israel, which means one who strives against man and God. Now, during most of his life, he was a trickster. He was a transplanter. He was all these negative terms that could be used as it relates to Jacob. But when he became Israel, who strove against man and God, he would eventually become the ancestor to the God-man that we know as Yahshua Jesus. We go on and on with names. Yahshua, Jesus, means one who delivers his people, one who saves his people. That's what his name means, and that's what he did. Paul means one who is rare, one who is unique, and one who stays humble. And so we know that Paul would eventually write most of the New Testament. Paul would be the apostle to the Gentiles, and yet in all of his glory, he always stayed humble to the will and purpose of God in serving his fellow man. So names mean something. Names mean a lot. And just like it means something, whatever your name may be, Brandon, Teresa, Kareen, all of those have a meaning. In fact, every word has a meaning, actually. I want you to look up the meaning of your name and see whether you've lived up to the meaning of the name. I see Brandon, his last name is Ezekiel. Ezekiel certainly has a biblical connotation to it. Here's Madeline. God bless you, Madeline, for tuning in this evening. So what's in a name? Just like names can identify individuals, it can also identify groups of people. As a black man who has studied and even taught history, I have studied or have been witness to the many name changes that white America and we ourselves have identified ourselves with. We've been niggers, the N-word, you know the N-word, colored, Negro, Afro-Americans, black, and African-American. Now the first names of us and the people of our community were given to us by the majority ruling class. And it wasn't until the 50s, 1950s, when we ourselves began to identify ourselves. Though Afro-American was a phrase we briefly used to identify who we thought ourselves to be, it wasn't until we began seeing ourselves as black and proud of our blackness, proud of our African heritage, proud of who we are as a people. No longer satisfying ourselves with identifying ourselves in one way or another as someone else sees us to be. But we began to see ourselves and stand with pride. I know that song, I'm Black and I'm Proud, James Brown sang there in the 60s. We began to embrace our unique traditions and our culture. And just being black, not being ashamed of being black, used to be a derogatory term. Somebody called you black. You were ready to fight somebody. But then we took the name and we began to embrace the name and identify ourselves with the name and its tradition and its culture and its religion and all the other things that make us proud. And now, as well as being black, I'm also a person with multiple physical challenges. Born with cerebral palsy. Diagnosed with asthma at 12. Had surgery as a teenager, 4 surgical procedures on my hip and then eventually being removed, as well as my toe. And then as an adult in my 60s, I had a knee replacement, so many ailments, high blood pressure, diabetes, and others. So I know the experience of being physically challenged. And I know what we have been identified with over the years. For centuries here in the United States alone, we have been called crippled, handicapped, and disabled. For nearly 200 years, people with challenged abilities were referred to as being cripples for the first 200 years of our existence here in the United States. Cripple meaning people who are maimed, who are lame, who are blind, retarded, deaf and dumb, disfigured, deformed, and slow. Freaks, if you will. Good afternoon to my sister. Good evening to my sister, Lady Supreme, Rhonda Supreme. God bless you for being in. In 1883, the word handicap replaced crippled, and handicap really means equalization. anyone or anything that is inferior to someone or something else needs a slight advantage to compete with that which is superior. Like in the sports of horse racing and golf and tennis and bowling, people are given a handicap. Those who are not as proficient in the skill of horse racing, bowling, golf, and tennis. So they're given a handicap so that they can compete with their superior opponent. By 1915, the term handicap was used for any child with a quote-unquote disability. By 1958, the word handicap was used for anyone, whether it be adult or child, who had a physical, developmental, or mental disability. Even now, in the 21st century, you'll see handicap parking, handicap placards. The word's still being used, though mainly it has a rise and it had fallen here in the 20th century. It rose in the 20th century in 1915 and it quickly fell out of grace in the 20th century rather. So then we come to a new term. The term disability, which is mainly used today by both society in general and those who have physical challenges in particular. Good afternoon to my nephew Christopher. And what's interesting about the word disability, it's interesting and also ironic, because in fact the word disability is more demeaning, is more despicable in its definition than handicap, which it has replaced. For most of us don't even know the meaning of the word disability. The meaning of the word means one who is limited, one who is disadvantaged, and one who is disqualified from doing anything. This is according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. One who is limited, one who is disadvantaged, and one who is disqualified from doing anything. That's the definition of disability. So when we in the disability community refer ourselves as being disabled, we're saying in essence, good afternoon, Aaron, we're saying in essence that we see ourselves as being limited. We see ourselves as being disadvantaged. And even worse, we see ourselves as being disqualified from doing anything. And yes, we have a whole spectrum of different types of challenged abilities, which I prefer to call it, coined by my wife a few years ago. She has lupus. I prefer challenged abilities because it's more accurate to what is the fact. I don't see myself. My nephew said they say ADD is a disability. Or they say a lot of things are disabilities. Good afternoon to Bishop Graves. Good afternoon, Cheryl. God bless you all for tuning in. The word disability means to be limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified from doing anything. So disability has replaced the word handicap in the accepted vernacular of society. It's the politically correct term that many embrace, including those within the disability community, quote unquote disability community. I say it's time, like in the African American community, who were called Negro and colored and Negra and the N-word. It's time that we begin to identify ourselves and take to ourselves a meaning that is more indicative to who we are. Yes, the disability community, or the challenged ability, which I prefer, people with challenged ability community. runs the full gamut of abilities. We know that. We have slight challenged ability. People with the slight challenge, mild, we call it abilities, challenged abilities, all the way to people that are totally dependent on society to take care of them. Bedridden, unable to speak, unable to do anything. We know there's the whole spectrum of persons with disabilities or persons with challenged abilities. We understand that. My nephew said, how about a term not typically used? Well, I say, just like I was getting ready to say now, we need to, as a community, and those who support our community, need to come up with a term that best describes who we are. I don't see myself, yes, I have some limitations, certainly. I'm in a wheelchair most of the time. I cannot walk for so long. And sometimes I can't even walk at all. It all matters on my situation on that particular day. There are situations I cannot do, things I cannot do. Yes, I'm limited to a certain extent. And that brings about a disadvantage. Most of the time, the disadvantage comes from without rather than within. Because people do not accommodate, do not make accessible to, do not embrace my uniqueness and others like me who are unique in their abilities. And so then we are in a position of being in a disadvantaged position, not because of our challenged ability, but rather because of how society does not embrace and accept and also adjust to and make accommodations for our challenged abilities. That puts us in a position of being in a disadvantaged position. And I have a real problem with the final definition of the word, which means disqualified from doing anything. If I'm disqualified from doing anything, I shouldn't be on Facebook right now expressing my thoughts, my ideas, in a contuitive, informative, instructive manner. Good afternoon to Bishop Hoffman. God bless you. So we have one of our presidents, the president that served longer than any other person in office, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was elected 4 times to the office of president. Nobody, not even the hero presidents, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, no matter who you name that you consider some of the best presidents we ever had, no one eclipsed the time that Franklin Roosevelt served as president. He served as president from 1933 to 1945. And because of his abilities, not his disabilities, his ability, he led us out of the Great Depression, put people back to work again, created Social Security, and he defeated Nazi Germany during World War II. That's Roosevelt. But let's be clear, and we're talking about, he's so special and he's this and that. And yes, he was. He was a very unique man that came along at a unique time. But he is not unique in the sense of he's a one-of-a-kind person. Sometimes we talk about their inspiration. He's a man that had an ability, who refused to be limited by his disability. That's why my new slogan is taking the dis out of disability. We got to take the dis out of disability. That's what he did. Yes, he had struggles. He couldn't walk. He had to wear 200-pound braces on both legs just to stand, and then be helped by aides and his own son to keep him standing for any length of time. That's why many times you see him sitting down. But it didn't stop his ability. His ability didn't lie in his legs. He suffered with a condition, not even suffered. He had a condition known as polio. He won the election while he was while he had that condition. He got that in the 1920s. He wasn't elected to the 1930s. And yes, society, the press and others and his aides and himself, they minimized and tried to hide the extent of his challenged ability. But nevertheless, he had one. That's why in my mind, Roosevelt has a dubious position in my mind. I admire what he did. I admire that he rose above his whatever limitations he may have felt himself to have, and he proved that we can do anything, even become president of the United States. I look at Stephen Hawking, who was the greatest scientific mind of both the 20th and 21st century until his recent passing, and he couldn't speak. He ended up being in a situation where he couldn't speak any longer. He had to use a synthesizer, a voice synthesizer, even to express what he thought about and what he did. But he was the greatest scientific mind of the 20th and the 21st century. So we have to understand that we have to start emphasizing what we do have and the abilities that we do possess. And I think we need to come together as a community with our great minds, our activists, our advocates, our experts in the field and all of that. In particular, we who live with this on a daily basis should come together and formulate a word or a phrase or whatever that best describes who we really are. We're more limited and disadvantaged by society than we are by our physical, developmental, mental, and sensory challenges. And we need to understand that. We need to move in a direction that embraces. We're in a political period now, and during this political time, you don't hear anybody talking about it on those debate stages or even in their rhetoric, even in their commercials. Very seldom is persons with challenged abilities even mentioned, and yet we are 60 million strong. We are the largest minority group in this country, and we include every minority group and every group. White folk, black folk, Asians, Native Americans, Latinos, Hispanics, everybody has somebody within the group that has a physical, developmental, sensory, or mental challenge. We touch the lives of the gay community. There are gay folk, transgender folk who have physical, developmental, mental, and sensory challenges. I know of many. And so we have to begin to see who we are and respect who we are, and don't let people identify us as to what they think we are. Because when you say disability, you mean one who is limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified from doing anything. And I won't accept that as a definition for me. I will not accept that as a definition for me. And I would hope that the 60 million Americans who have challenged abilities in society as a whole will begin to look at another way to define who we are by our abilities. We have a governor right now in Texas who's paralyzed. We just talked about Roosevelt. We talked about Stephen Hawking, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Stephen Hopkins, he had cerebral palsy. My nephew said he would like to give some testimony. And Bishop Hoffman says we must, as a country, stop disabling us so we can enable you. And that's true. We are the persons with challenged abilities are the poorest amongst us. We talk about police brutality. More people who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges have experienced police brutality and even murder than any other group. You think about Eric Gardner, for example. And you look at him as being a black man who was choked to death, but he was also a man with a few challenge abilities. He was obese, he had asthma, and he had a heart condition. And all of those things played into his dying. Look at how he died. He died of asphyxiation. They choked him to death. And naturally, if you have asthma, and naturally, if you are obese, and naturally, if you have a heart condition, being choked will instantly kill you. So all that played into his dying. We think about Sandra Bland, and we think about her killing herself, quote unquote. I suspect something different, but she was in the jail for some minor traffic violation. Thrown in jail, found her hung. But she was diagnosed with a depression. And she also had epilepsy. So yes, she was a black woman, but she also had some challenges, physical challenges, that also played into whatever happened to her. And I can go on and on. Michael Brown, some of the other ones that we know about, they're African Americans, but they also had physical, developmental, and even mental challenges. Not enough accessible housing and affordable housing. Buildings still are not accessible. A few years ago, I went to my doctor's office, and I couldn't get in my own doctor's office because I wasn't strong enough to open up the doors to get into the building, and the door was so narrow that you had to open up both doors in order to get into my own doctor's office. Christopher says, did you know that I was approved for disability 7 years ago? Doctors told me that I'd be in a wheelchair in the next year. I turned it down. Of course, he's not in a wheelchair, thanks be to God. But there have been 10,000 people from 2015 to 2017, 10,000 people who were waiting to be approved to be disabled, quote disabled, by Social Security and its different programs. 10,000 disabled people who had to wait for a determination on their disability by a bureaucratic government who died. 10,000 died waiting for someone to determine whether they were disabled. I use the word that they use, disabled, challenged, if I call it. I'm going to tell you the truth. Even on my thing, yes, I get a help from the government, but even if you look at the form, it says I've had cerebral palsy since 2000 and something. I said, what? Cerebral palsy is a birth defect, or at the latest, you're maybe 5 years old. I was diagnosed at 14 months old. And I probably had it before then, but they noticed it once I started walking or attempting to walk, that there was a way that I walked that showed there was something wrong. So I've had it all my life. I'll be 68 in November. But once again, it's the bureaucracy, how they define things, how society defines who we are. And it's time that we begin to identify ourselves. We have to insist that the 20 candidates in the Democratic Party, which prides itself on being liberal and progressive and open-minded, begin to really address the issues that daily impact the lives of people with challenged abilities. I know the Republicans have tried to block many things that help persons with challenged abilities. I know that. I've been on the front lines against Trump. I've been on the front line against Toomey, who was our senator here in the state of Pennsylvania. I've been on the front line in Harrisburg, fighting against the Republicans and others who want to cut back, cut out, cut down, whatever, eliminate health care that would help persons with challenged abilities. I've been on the front line with that. So I know how much that the Republicans have been a stumbling block and how we have had to do that. But even there, the Democrats have not accredited properly, in my estimation, nor supported our effort to make sure that what they're trying to do is done. It was when people within my group, I was not able to go, but people within my group went to Washington, D.C., all from all over the country, went to Washington, D.C., protested year after year, blocking the efforts of the Republicans to cut out and cut down and cut away on Social Security, on SSI, SSDI, Obamacare, other things that would benefit us. And I'm going to tell you something else, and we're through for the day, that being disabled, labeled disabled, gives us. It makes us marginalized. That's why you don't hear much about our situation. And when you do, it's only about health care. Not talking about the buildings that still are not available to us to enter into. Not talking about conditions that still are being barred by us, that we can't get on all the transportation. There are still places in this country, other than maybe the big cities, that you can't use their buses. Even in Philadelphia, there's only one trolley that we can get onto. And even that, it all matters on the size of your wheelchair, what kind of wheelchair, and all of that. So there still is a lot going to the rural areas. Here in Pennsylvania alone, I can't even get there because those bus systems don't have accessibility to persons with challenged ability. So many issues, affordable housing, accessible housing. It's just ridiculous, all the issues that we still face even after the ADA was made into law in 1990. Coming on 30 years. And we still have discrimination. We still are limited and disadvantaged because of how society has viewed us, how society has embraced us and refrained from embracing us. How can you have 60 million people, 33 million of us are eligible to vote, and yet 30% of the voting places are not accessible to persons with challenge? Only 30% are accessible, rather, to persons with challenged abilities. And I mean of all type. So if you have a ramp and don't have an interpreter, you're still not accessible. If you have a ramp and you don't have Braille material that a person who has visual challenges can read, you're still not accessible. I'm talking about full accessibility. Ramps, elevators, whatever, for those who have mobility issues. Sign language interpreters for those who have hearing issues. Braille and other material for those who have visual issues. Places to sit for those who, like my wife, they have invisible, but yet they can only stand for X amount of time. There's other issues that people have that need to be addressed. What's in a name? A name defines who you are. So we're considered disabled. The definition for the name, for the word disabled, means one who is limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified from doing anything. I don't know about you, and I have many a friend who has a challenged ability, or two or three. And I don't know whether you see yourself as being limited, disadvantaged, and certainly disqualified from doing anything. But I don't know many people, and I know people that are bedbound and cannot do anything. They really are disabled in the definition of the word. I know there are people like that. But so many more, most I know, are gifted, talented, have many talents, and have many gifts and abilities. They go untapped. We're the least employed group. First fired after being the last hired. That's our situation. And I can go on and on with all the different aspects that have been of society that have been denied. Reverend Jesse Jackson says this, that the most denied group within America are persons with disabilities. He used the word disabilities. And he said those who are minorities with disabilities are the most disenfranchised of everybody. So as you're talking about all these other groups, remember the most disenfranchised And the most denied opportunity are persons with challenged abilities. And the sad part about it is that we represent every other group. So people that are advocating for the African Americans should include fighting for our cause, because we are part of the African American community. Those who are fighting for immigration and equal rights for Latinos should also fight for the rights of persons with challenged abilities, because we are a part of that group. Those who are LGBT group, we are part of that group, because there are people that are part of us that are a part of it. They should be fighting alongside of us. It's ironic because we fight for every other group. I know I have. I know many people have. We fight for and advocate for every group, but it's not reciprocal. We don't get the same kind of support, the same kind of recognition. I know the Million Women's March, we've had them 3 years and not one time. I'm talking about in the national group. I know in some of the states, some of the cities, they've had people with women with challenged abilities speak. But I'm talking about the national, the one in Washington, D.C., the one that all the news media covers. Even the very first one, I got the list of everybody who spoke. There were hundreds of people speaking for women during the first Million Women's March, which was the day after Trump was inaugurated back in 2017. And not one represented the challenged ability community. Not one. And yet they prided themselves in saying this was the largest group of challenged ability people at any function like this. And yet not one of those largest group that attended this particular one, you can pick one out of that group to speak for those who have physical, developmental, mental, and sensory challenges. I think not. I know there were some women. I know some of the women that went. I know some men that went to the first the Million Women's March, and not nay one was invited to speak. You had all kinds of people of every walk of life, every religious group, every ethnical group, every cultural group, the most remote, the most minimized numbers of people that are in this country still were given the platform to express their concerns and their interests and promote their causes. All but one. Women or anyone with a challenged abilities were not included on the national stage. Now, I know there was some, I think, in Massachusetts and one in New York. I'm talking about the national stage. Washington, D.C., behind the White House where it was held, and behind the Capitol building from where it was held. That's where the news, ABC, NBC, CNN, all those major news outlets cover. Not nay one. And it's time that we begin to stand for who we are and our needs. And we should have our own disability, if you will. I want to call it physical challenge agenda. Agenda for people with challenged abilities. And I want to hear us have a forum, a town hall, a forum, a platform where we are there speaking on our concerns to the candidates. I would like to hear on one of those debates. The fourth debate comes up next month in October. I would like to see the fourth debate include an issue or issues that directly, other than health care, that impacts everybody. Medicare for all would be everybody. I'm talking about those that are specifically directed toward persons with challenged abilities. Christopher said, I refuse to accept being disabled. I refuse to accept the term disabled. I don't deny who I am. And part of who I am is a person with cerebral palsy and other conditions that I have. I don't deny who I am. I deny being labeled a certain kind of way. And so we have to set a new agenda. Everybody else is fighting for. Nobody else says we shouldn't fight for this. We should, we're the only group that everybody wants us to stay docile, stay quiet, be okay with it. One day it'll be a different day. And no. We've been here forever. One program I showed how there have been people with challenged abilities all the way back in the prehistoric days. So we've been here since time immemorial. There's always been someone that has not fit the mold of what society considers quote unquote normal. There's always been somebody like that. Always, since the history of mankind, always have been somebody. So we've been around for a long, long time. Long time, since the beginning of mankind. There have been people who had some kind of ailment, some kind of disability of some sort of limitation, And so here we are. Again, asking the question, what's in a name? Well, as we already proven to you already, names mean a lot. Names mean a lot. People are identified by their name. By their name, people are labeled. People are put in certain boxes just by your name. People can look a certain way, but your name will denote whether we embrace you or whether we deny you. And so persons with challenged abilities, just like persons of African American heritage, need to be able to identify who they are, stand up for who they are, and make society recognize who they are, who we are. So I hope something was received, something was gotten out of all what we talked about today. And look forward to having another conversation. We have quite a few. While I've been away, I've gotten a lot of information. I've got a lot of programming ready to go. So keep us in your prayers. Keep us in your mind. And the fight, the struggle continues. And will continue until every American of every stripe, of every ability and challenged ability are treated fairly, equally, and looked at with the respect that each of us are due. There is no embarrassment. There should be no being ashamed and no feelings of unworthiness. Good afternoon, Bill. There should be no feelings of unworthiness in any of us. God don't make no mistake, no matter what you may think about it. And I'm not a mistake. I was born with cerebral palsy, and I don't believe that was a mistake. I don't believe that was a punishment. I don't believe that was a result of sin. I don't believe any of that. I just believe I was born with cerebral palsy. And just like Roosevelt proved, no matter whether you have polio, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, whether you have Down syndrome, autism, ADD, whether you have lupus, epilepsy, paranoia, schizophrenia, whether you're deaf, whether you're blind, whether you're short of stature, whether you're a giant, terror, God bless you, no matter what the situation may be, we are equal. We are the same. And each of us have a right to be treated with the same respect, the same consideration as anybody else. Well, until next time that we speak, we'll be doing this more often now, where we've had a lot of issues in our family, death and illness, still wrestling with some illnesses within our family that have kind of taken me away, and my own health has not been the very best. But we're back now. We're going to do what we have to do. God bless you too, my dear friend. And until next time, remember to keep it real and fight for that which is worth fighting for. Because if you don't fight for what you stand for, nobody else will. God bless you, Linda. Check out this tape. I'm going to save it on my site. And what you didn't get or you weren't here to receive, I'm going to keep on fighting that good fight. You're right. I'm going to keep on fighting the good fight. because it's worth doing. So until next time, be gracious, be blessed, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.